what's the best thing to do to come out of a slump after a game, after a tough defeat? I think you can spin your wheels unless you can kind of accurately locate where the breakdown is happening, and all of a sudden that hole just seems deeper and deeper and deeper. So I think honest evaluation is the beginning, and then I think simplification. I really believe that you start to make your goals smaller, and you start to have these mini achievements, these mini victories, and those really, although they don't seem like a lot where you're trying to go, they start to build the confidence and the momentum to get to where you're ultimately trying to get back to.
So in September of 1993, while pitching for the Yankees, you threw a no-hitter against the Cleveland Indians. But you had a game against them just a few days earlier back in Cleveland, which was a little different. Talk about that game first.
Yeah, the no-hitter came out of the blue because just a few days before my previous start against the exact same team, but in Cleveland, I had faced them and had a rough outing. I don't think I made it out of the third inning. I don't know how many runs or hits or errors, whatever it was, but they had seen enough from me by about the third inning that I got yanked out of that game. And, I had been traded to the Yankees to start that season, so it was a different time, and it was kind of a tumultuous year, up and down. Loved playing in New York. I loved the fans. I loved Yankee Stadium. I loved the Yankee organization. But I didn't perform the way I wanted to. So that outing in Cleveland where I got shelled was a low point, a real low point in the season. And so the idea that a no-hitter might follow that 5 days later or 6 days later, because we did have an off day in between, was rather shocking and improbable.
Yeah. After that Cleveland game, didn't you, well, not after it, actually during it, didn't you just leave the clubhouse and go for a run?
I did, yeah. I had I didn't respond sometimes to losing as well as I would have liked to in hindsight. I took defeat a little bit too hard. I wish I would have been easier on myself, and that was an example of that. You build yourself up for 5 days for a start. You go out there, and then 3 innings later, you're done, and you don't know what to do with all that preparation and that excitement and that adrenaline, and you're just out of the game. And a lot of times I would find a stationary bike, or in this case, there really wasn't much of one in the old Cleveland locker room. They didn't have much of anything, so
I can attest to that.
I just put on my running shorts and t-shirt and running shoes, and I just went for a run, which is maybe not looked well upon in the heat of the moment when your teammates are still out there.
I can imagine if somebody happened by you going, "Isn't that the guy who just pitched for the
Yankees?" Yeah, he was just pitching.
Out here running.
Yeah. And
Looks familiar.
Buck Showalter actually called me in the office and asked me what I was thinking in that instance. But it was that physical exertion. We talked. You talk about moving past slumps and disappointment. Oftentimes, I turned to just physical.
Right.
Working out, the building blocks of preparing again and starting over, and I guess that was the start of it.
Maybe working out to fatigue, so that you sort of let it fall away, all the stuff that happened to you, so that you can begin anew. Maybe that's part of it.
Yeah, it's emotional and physical. It's cathartic almost, and I really used that physical release as a way to start transitioning to the next start. Even if I had a good game, the next day was always a long run. It was always an endurance type of workout. It was always, I know that they train differently nowadays, and I don't know how much they believe in some of that stuff. But for myself and a lot of starting pitchers, that used to be sort of the good long endurance run and sweat it out and start over and start building back up.
I never knew that. What was your mindset going into the no-hitter? Because you obviously just have had a tough season, a really tough game. Was there something different going into that game, or your mindset changed a little bit?
You know, I think of a number of different things. So in the series in between Cleveland and when we were going to play Cleveland next, we played the Chicago White Sox. They came to New York. And I had two really good friends on the Chicago White Sox team, Kirk McCaskill, who I pitched with in Anaheim, and then Robin Ventura, who I played on the Olympic team with. And they came to town, and we went out and after the game and had a couple beers and just relaxed. And it was just really good to see old friends. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it was a nice way to just sort of get out of the treadmill of New York and expectations and scrutiny and I don't know, there was just something about hanging out with them that really kind of reset my thinking, kind of emphasized what's important, good friends, and it's not entirely about the pressure, the grinder of this next start.
Right.
And then, the day came about. It was Saturday day game. I loved pitching day games. I loved pitching in Yankee Stadium. And I just felt a lightheartedness. I just felt like some of the heaviness of the season and of being traded for whatever reason didn't seem as prevalent that morning.
It's so important. And I have a son that's playing quarterback, as you know, Jim, at Bowling Green. And the discussions I have, some people think, well, you're talking like, 3-step drops and how to read coverages. No, none of that. It's all mindset. It's all the feeling. It's all the state of mind when you go and enter a contest, right? And it's so easy to beat yourself up because as athletes, everyone points at your mistakes more so than your successes. So, I think it's really interesting just hearing you talk about, sort of letting it go and moving on and being in that calm state of the fact that we're just playing a game. Yes. We're just playing a game. If you can take it back to maybe even in your youth, right? That sort of mindset could be valuable. And it sounds like that's what helped you.
You're right. You can get so caught up in the mechanics of what you're doing. You can get so caught up in the mental preparation, the visualization. You have so many coaches around. You have so much scrutiny that the game, the fun, can get lost. You're exactly right. We love to play golf, and
right.
And how many times do you get out there and you're thinking about your backswing or your head play or something, and all of a sudden you're not playing a game anymore. You're caught up in a lot of little different things that can really, take the joy out of it and
create tension,
create
stress,
and distraction. It's really fun when you can get back to start having fun again, despite being, in an incredibly competitive environment.
What's the movie where Major League, where the pitcher had this clear the mechanism comment?
Yeah, I think so.
Clear the mechanism? I don't remember that.
That was
I remember the movie.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, in fact, that's one of the things Matthew does for himself, and it's helped him. Did you have anything when you're on the mound? You got they're a big hitter coming up. This is an important at bat, and you got to get them out. Anything that you did that allowed you to take you back to the fun?
I had a lot of mechanisms like that. Another great movie was For the Love of the Game with Kevin Costner, and they really try to, the book especially is wonderful, and they really try to get into the mental thoughts of a pitcher, particularly between innings. Because baseball is a game of stops and starts. You have your 3 outs, and then you have that time in between where you have that time to reset a little bit. So, yeah, if you ever saw a Major League dugout, it's a pretty filthy floor. There's sunflower seeds and anything you can imagine sitting down there.
Chewing tobacco.
Everything. And so, my mechanism would be to mentally reset, would be kind of just clean off that floor in front of me, just
right
kind of keep that
where you were sitting?
Tidy. Yeah. And then on the mound, you have the mound, and then you have your pitching rubber. And, that gets dirty and covered up. And I always like to, between every inning, go out there and sort of make sure that was clean. There was a reset there. And so, those symbols were important.
And that was more of like a mental reset than actually any sort of physical reason to have the rubber clean. You're just kind of clearing your head. It's a way of clearing your head.
It was symbolic of whatever negativity or whatever thoughts that you were sort of carrying along with you, because those get in the way of being in the moment, being present. And, I just felt like trust is so important, belief, conviction. In pitching, and being quarterback, you can't hold back. You can't hope that a throw is going to make it to that spot where you're trying to get it, or a pitch is going to, you can't, if you just hold back a little bit, you lose that extra dimension that is necessary, that life on a fastball or a pitch. And so conviction and trust and execution really revolves around that idea, to be able to finish, to reach and get out here and make that happen. In every major league stadium, there's a flag, American flag, and at the top on the flagpole there's a metal ball. You probably can see it. Right. And I used to find that in every stadium, that gold ball, and I would imagine the word trust written on it.
Interesting.
And so if things sped up on me during a game, if I was caught up in Oakland and, Ricky Henderson's up and McGuire's coming and Jose Canseco after that and Dave Henderson, I could always, realize that I had moved away from the moment and go back to that gold ball and imagine the word trust. And it was a nice way of bringing you back to the moment.
Interesting. Speaking of back to the moment, let's go back to the no-hitter. So on that day, did you kind of make a decision to just keep it simple and using the word trust, just trust your stuff and not go in there and try and be too fine or be too perfect, but just let it rip? Was that part of your mindset going into that game?
Yeah, a trusting mindset was the goal. And, my catcher that day was Matt Noakes. And Matt wasn't our starting catcher. A guy named Mike Stanley was our starting catcher, who was was having a better offensive year. But Matty was no slouch himself. But oftentimes for a day game, after a night game, you'll have your backup catcher, so to speak. And I always kind of like that. They bring an enthusiasm to being in the lineup, and so they kind of show up with the coffee and they're fired up, And I'll never forget, before the game, he had the Indians lineup, and it brought back some bad memories from that previous game.
Yeah.
And, but we talked about it not being important about what the competition was bringing to the table, whether it was Kenny Lofton's speed or Albert Bell or Jim Thome, whoever was in it didn't really matter. The trust, the belief in letting the pitch go, and whatever happens after that. But making the best possible pitch you can over and over again. And Matty really emphasized that, and his enthusiasm helped to bring that home.
That's awesome. Did you have that same sort of attitude, let's say when you were playing the Steelers or somebody like that, of like, hey, I can't think about the fact that I got the Steelers in front of me. I just got to do my thing.
You didn't have time to think. A little different, than a pitcher on the mound, right?
Well, they're chasing you
Jim
around.
Talked about.
Jim gets to stand on the mound and throw without anybody trying to hit him.
Well, they could come after him with a bat if they wanted to. That's a lot worse.
Well, yeah, that's
I think the beginning of the game, there's anxiousness, butterflies, which is really normal, excitement about the game. But once you get in there and once you get under center and you're calling the signals, and I'm sure you can say the same thing, Jim, it's you're just in the moment and you're doing what you've been trained to do, your entire life, and you don't get caught up in what's going on around. In fact, when the ball's in your hands, the ball snaps, you kind of hear a buzz from the crowd. You kind of hear the crowd, you kind of hear some things, but once you have the ball in your hands, it sort of goes blank.
It's just like white noise quiet.
White noise quiet, and because you're in your little space doing what you do, and I'm sure you've experienced
Is it that same thing as a pitcher, where it's just, you don't even hear, once you're on the mound, you don't even hear the crowd?
Yeah, it didn't really matter. I found the bigger the crowd, the easier it was to tune out.
Interesting.
Because it's so monolithic. I'm sure in football stadiums it's like that. It's just a constant hum, rather than a smaller crowd. You hear all the dissonant voices and different things, people yelling.
Right.
So I always found, it was funny watching the athletes play in football or baseball during the pandemic, playing in these big empty stadiums.
And you hear like the coach yelling instruction.
That'd be so weird.
It's like an echo goes through the whole stadium.
Yeah, it was very strange,
Right.
and to witness and you know, and I'm sure this is the same thing with you, Paul. People say, how do you play in front of 40,000 people or whatever, and I didn't really appreciate that question until I saw the pandemic happen, and these huge stadiums with 50 people sitting around.
Yeah.
Right.
And I thought, man, that would be really hard. It'd be harder to play like that than it would to play in with thousands of people there, because it's just a different energy and excitement. And so, that was pretty interesting, I thought.
So in baseball, a no-hitter is obviously a really special thing. At what point in the game are you aware of the fact that you've got one? And at what point does it start feeling like, 6 more outs, 5 more outs? Did that ever happen for you?
So I noticed about the 5th inning, to be honest, which is way too early, right? Because it's just, you got 4 innings to go. But mostly because it was so different from that last outing, when I'd probably give up a hit the first batter, look up and see him not have any hits. And then, you just pick up on subtle cues that are going on around you in the dugout. Guys are the stupid superstition where no one's talking.
No one's talking to you. It's like the field goal kicker.
Yeah.
Can I ask you about that real fast before you go on? Would you prefer that they came up and talked to you? Because it is the superstition, and they want nothing to do with you at that point.
Right.
If you had your druthers, would you rather have them come sit next to you and talk to you, or do you want to be left alone when you're in that kind of a zone, if you will?
Well, I think most starting pitchers, if you watch them on the dugout or in the dugout, and for the ones who don't go down in the tunnel, you do kind of like your space. I mean, you do kind of like that quiet reset like we were speaking about. So it's not like you're chatty anyway, but it's the overall quietness in the dugout that nobody else is talking either. You know what I mean? And that's when you notice that,
Don't talk to him. Don't talk to him.
You're getting the 7th, 8th inning and the 9th, before the 9th. So it you don't like difference. You want it to sort of feel the same, even if you're kind of in your own world. The different atmosphere is something that.
So were you still cleaning the floor and doing everything you always did?
For sure. Yeah. I had a tongue depressor. I always sat next to the medical kit. I had a tongue depressor. I'd clean my cleats off in between.
Awesome.
So it was always these little resets, always these little cleansing.
Which takes you to that present moment, takes you into the now, right? Instead of looking forward, which, you start thinking too much. First of all, you're thinking, which you shouldn't be doing, right? That's the big mistake, is thinking. I remember in a preseason game, and I was vying with Brian Sight for the starting job in preseason 1983 with a new offensive coordinator, and I was trying not to make a mistake. I was thinking. I was, don't risk this, don't risk that. You can't play like that. You got to play like you know how to play, and you got to react and respond.
No doubt.
And that sounds like that's what you absolutely did in the no-hitter. You stayed in that moment, and you focused on the process.
Yeah.
I've always been curious. Now it's the 9th inning. So everything you just said, theoretically is great. But when you're 3, 2, 1 out away from having a no-hitter, are you starting to get nervous? Like, what's your mindset like in that 9th inning? Because now you're really close.
Yeah. Nervous, not so much nervous, but excited. And the feelings are very much the same, real excitement, that gets your adrenaline going, the heart racing, the physical, manifestations of that excitement are right there, just like nervousness, exactly the same way.
But maybe the positive side of nervousness.
It you cue into it, but I think being on the cusp of something really exciting can be as much of a battle as being on the face of real adversity. Because you're excited in the same ways, and you can be distracted in the same ways, so I felt it. I felt it in my knees and my chest, in my breathing. And breathing is, a whole nother topic that we could talk about over and over again about the importance of that in those types of situations. But it was fun. It was exciting.
Oh,
and,
good.
and I had a no-hitter earlier in the season against the Chicago White Sox. And Bo Jackson flared a ball out into the outfield. It was a pretty good pitch. I believe it was the 8th inning. And so I knew how fickle this is, right? I knew how much luck is involved, and you can make a good pitch. And
guy could hit a ball into the dirt and rolls 8 feet and beats it out, and there's your no-hitter gone.
Easy. So, being in that similar situation earlier in the year kind of helped me to, I wouldn't say be resigned, but to understand, hey, just make your pitches. And if it happens, it's going to happen. Awesome. And so that's kind of what I was thinking.
So when that final out happened, was that just one of the, in your totality of your career, just one of those elation moments walk us through that feeling of now you have the no-hitter?
It was a ground ball to shortstop. Randy Velarde was our shortstop, was a great player, and Donnie Mattingly was our first baseman. And Donnie was the captain in New York, and he was, Derek Jeter before Derek Jeter, and someone who I looked up to greatly as a teammate and as a friend. And when Donnie caught the ball at first base to get the last batter, Carlos Baerga, at first base, it's like the world stops. It almost goes a little bit black. It's just it's like the suddenness of it, the excitement of it, like whoa. It happened. This thing, this build-up, this pressure that had been coming. And then I wish everybody in the world could feel like that moment, just that excitement, that much presence and joy, and to share it. Team sports are the best. I love.
Right, because you got 25 guys jumping all over you. You're not just doing it by yourself.
Yeah,
totally.
you're
and they're as excited as you are because
they're really
they had
happy
a part in
for
the whole thing.
They really are. And Wade Boggs was a Hall of Fame. He was our third baseman, and he had an appreciation for baseball and history, and I remember the look in his eyes, how excited he was, and to share that. And then my wife was there, and she was in the tunnel, as soon as we got up there, and she and I went out in New York that night, and it's just such a shared deal, and I really cherish it for those reasons.
Hey, Paul.
Yeah.
This is the part where we're supposed to tell people to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Okay, will you please do that then? I mean, if you enjoy it, please do.
And if you don't, do it anyways, because we need your help.
We do.
Also, we have a website called GameChangeNation.com. Just go there and subscribe, and you'll get tons of free content.
And what we're really trying to do is create a community of people that love sports.
Yep.
And the great lessons that we learn from sports, but we want to hear from you.
We do. So we're going to have a bunch of social media pages, from TikTok to Instagram to Twitter to Facebook. Instagram, I probably already said all of them. Please join them and tell us your stories. We'd love to hear from you. Oh, and we wrote a book.
Oh.
Forgot about that.
Forgot that.
The book is called Through the Tunnel. It's available on Amazon now. If you go straight down here to this link that you can see below us, you will be able to purchase it. We'd love it if you could do it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.